Hello. Thank you very much, both of you, for your keynotes. Let's just start right away by stating a simple fact that there's probably no journalist in this room today who doesn't really use social media or who doesn't talk about their daily life on Instagram, find future sources there as well. Can the audience still feel the difference between a journalist and an influencer online, and really should they be able to tell the difference?
Ooh, man, that's such a great question. I feel like I always hear a lot of criticism from journalists that say, the audience doesn't know the difference between news and opinion, and the audience doesn't know the difference between a journalist and a newsmaker or a creator. But I also think that's a problem that journalism started themselves. I think a lot about cable news, especially. You watch, a channel like CNN, you see all of these people on the screen and they're talking, and half of them are not journalists. They're commentators, they're analysts, and you would not really know that. It's not that explicit, even though they say it. People see someone on the news, they assume what they're saying is, journalistic in nature. So I think sometimes, it's becoming increasingly hard for people to really start to tell the difference. And I think it's really important that creators, especially who want to be in this space making news, that they're very clear about the transparency about how they get their sources and the reporting that they do, so that they can really show that they are doing this really good work.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I think that it isn't like a binary. It's not like a journalist over here, private person over here. It's more of a spectrum, right? And there are journalists who work on various points along that. Some who are more comfortable being all in and completely out there and kind of merging their private life with their work than others, and to some good effect and to some very scary effect. And there are others for whom it's really problematic. For a lot of women, it's actually problematic because people are really ugly to women online, especially female journalists who they tend to target in ways that they just don't target men. And for people like I was talking about earlier, like Marissa Kaba, she's actually not super active on a lot of platforms. She is active on Blue Sky, which is a little bit of a different vibe to it. But it becomes a safety issue, right, for her, and how you are out there. And even like video journalists, women journalists, one Joss Fong, who I worked with at Vox, and then have worked with her since now that she is in the creator space, has had a lot of issues with being propositioned and men reaching out to her. And so it becomes really a personal question, I think, of where you draw that line.
Yeah, that's really true. But for our second question, what are the ethical dilemmas for journalists personalizing their content online? Is there necessarily a trade-off, more audience, less ethics?
I don't know that there is a trade-off. I mean, so just if they are strictly sharing their work online, I think that what we are seeing is it is another means of delivery, right? It is a delivery system. And many journalists are increasingly worried about the fact that they're doing incredible work that with traditional media outlets is not necessarily reaching as big of an audience as it used to, right? And so where it is able to reach those audiences is on social platforms. So I think actually more journalists are comfortable with it than we're giving credit for, because journalists do want their work to be seen. They want their work to have an impact. They want it to be read. And so that isn't an ethical question there. I think where it becomes an ethical question is what Adriana was talking about, when there isn't a clear line between what is reporting and what is commentary. And one of the things that we need to think about as we build out frameworks for ethical creator model journalism is how can journalists who are working in that space actually develop signaling to say, this is fact, this is my opinion, that it's okay for both those things to coexist on my social feeds, but I need to clearly delineate when it's one or the other.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I love when journalists share a little bit more about their lives on social media. I'm a huge social media person. I've probably posted like 7 times on Instagram this morning. And it just kind of shows you, I think that really helps with the relationship building, but I do, agree it should be optional. Some journalists just, like it better. But I have found when I've worked with newsrooms and even just getting them comfortable on social video, a lot of them, once they do it, they love it and they want to do more and more of it. So I think it's also just thinking about the tools as well.
Is there any way to project reliability and seriousness on social media as a journalist while remaining attractive for audiences on these platforms?
Well, yeah, I'm happy to go first. So yeah, protect from liability. I mean, I talked about that a little bit earlier, right? That liability is a big issue, I mean, for any journalist. And it doesn't differ whether it is, publishing in a newspaper or for a news organization and on social media. If somebody takes exception to what you're writing about, whether it is a government official or a private citizen, people like Elon Musk or Peter Thiel, like they're going to go after you. And for independent creator journalists, they do not have the institutional backing, right, to actually protect themselves from that. And that's a big part of the infrastructure that needs to develop. But I don't think that it is fundamentally different at the end of the day. It's just, again, another delivery system.
Yeah, I think it just, more and more requires you to be very smart about what you post online. I think about, creators and even journalists in the States, especially where, we live in a very litigious society where people love to sue people. And I always, encourage journalists to really make sure that they're thinking critically about what they post. I like what was said earlier about, if you would go out in the middle of the night and scream it in a public space, would you still post it? Like, I think having those guidelines is really important.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Adriana, you already talked about this a bit in your keynote earlier about metrics and different types of metrics. I have more of a general question of, do we have it sort of all wrong collectively about those measurement of success of journalism through data about the size of our audience? Like, should we really be measuring the success of journalism that way, and if not, something else maybe?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always talk about, how newsrooms should be, data informed, but not data driven. I think there's so much data out there. There's probably, way more data today than there was even 5 or 10 years ago. So I think looking at the numbers, the hard numbers, are really, really important, because if you're posting something and no one is reading it, there's a problem, and there's ways that you can adjust. But something that I have been thinking a lot about and helping newsrooms figure out is, how do we measure impact? So how do we measure that this is actually changing things, whether that's changing legislation, whether that's making someone's life easier day to day? So for me, I think it's really just figuring out how to combine both of them in a way that works really well. A lot of newsrooms in the US are thinking more about how to create these impact metrics and report them alongside the numbers, so they can say something like, yes, this article did get, 5,000 page views, but it also is the reason why there's a new law in our town. It's also the reason why someone has more access to food or resources. So I think thinking about both of them is really crucial.
Yeah, I would add to that, when I was coming up in digital newsrooms, I was coming up in the age where we'd all have screens around the room that were telling us, it was almost like the Hunger Games for reporters, right? Like, who had more page views, and a lot of success was defined by page views and unique visitors. And really the more valuable metric, and Adriana talked about this in her chat earlier, is the impact, but also the engagement. And I say that because if we are talking about the loss of audiences that are not engaging with traditional journalism, where we see them engaging, it's really important to it's like a little tiny flame, right, that you want to foster into a big fire. And to me, that's a really valuable metric for us to say, if we see an audience that is suddenly responding to something, they're moved to comment on it or they're sharing it, we need to understand how to continue to develop that out. And in the creator ecosystem, the creator journalism ecosystem, that is a key way trust is actually being built with audiences. You will hear teenagers in the United States, and this is quoted in several studies, say that the way they figure out if a journalist is credible is they go into the comments, right, on a TikTok feed or on a YouTube feed, and see what are other people saying about it. And so we need to be monitoring those spaces and be aware of it, but also be aware that we don't define what the success metrics are. The audience does. And if that's how they're defining it, we need to figure out how to actually get our arms around it.
Yeah. Very good point. So this is also for Liz, another question. As you said in your presentation, there is a decline in trust in institutional brands and an increase in trust in real people. So as young journalists, should we just ditch the idea of trying our luck in traditional media and just focus on social media?
No, not at all. Not at all. Again, that's going to be like a really personal decision for you. It may also just be a luck decision, like based on where your career takes you and where opportunities arise. But I would never say that, first of all, as somebody who for 30 years like came up in the traditional institutional journalism world. I like a lot of journalism students like have a love for that and the tradition and like the learning that happens. Like there is a really huge benefit to young journalists working in collaboration with journalists who have been doing this for a while. Right, the learning that's passed down, it's almost like an apprenticeship, a mentorship. So that is really important, and that is not something that has to go away as we embrace or expand our definition of journalism and what legitimate journalism is. Those partnerships can happen, but we just need to reimagine them and how we actually bring those different groups together.
Yeah, and I would also add, the number and different types of jobs in journalism have changed so much. When I graduated, I got a degree in, I think they called it print and digital journalism, and that's not even something, that they're really teaching anymore is print journalism in university, but we're seeing jobs now where someone is, a video producer, they're a creator host, they're a social host. These are jobs that didn't exist in journalism even 2 years ago. So I think, in addition to going down the creator route, there's so many jobs in journalism that you can start to do that didn't exist that might be more interesting for younger audiences as well.
Thank you. So maybe as a last question to wrap this up, talking more about AI, because we see audiences are basically increasingly splitting their time between, scrolling on social media and talking to an artificial intelligence. So do you think that AI will define the codes of journalism to sort of follow, to be able to attract audiences?
Ooh, great question. I'm a big fan of newsrooms adopting AI and journalism in general adopting AI. I think we've seen time and time again that the industry has been very slow to adopt things, whether it's the internet or, so many different tools. And I think now's a great time to rewrite what it looks like to use these and create, ethical guidelines and boundaries and things. So I think if anything, AI will complement a lot of this work. But I also think it speaks to how important that relationship with your audience is. In a world where everyone is looking at AI and there's deep fakes and it's hard to tell what's true or not, being able to see a person and engage with them is so valuable.
Yeah, and that's the point that I would underscore. Like, I think AI, yes, we need to certainly understand how to harness it, to use it in multiple ways to actually make reporting and news gathering and news dissemination more doable. But the human connection is going to be, I think, the kind of superpower of journalism versus AI, because humans at the end of the day are looking for a human connection with others and actually tend to build trust around, like, it isn't just even seeing a human, it's feeling that there's some sort of affinity or relationship that you have with that other human. Of course, maybe all bets are off when they start developing like AI personalities, personas who look like us and feel like us. That already happened. But I really, truly believe at the end of the day that human connection is a big part of why audiences build trust with journalists.
That's fair. Well,
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much
for your
time.